When we picture the end of the world today, we usually look up. We imagine sudden, total destruction delivered by an external force we can't control, an asteroid, an alien invasion, a rogue solar flare. It is fire from the sky, arriving without warning. This modern framing of the apocalypse is terrifying precisely because it strips humanity of all agency. If the cause of our destruction is completely external, we are nothing more than helpless bystanders waiting for the cosmic clock to run out. But the oldest recorded prophecies in human history, from the Vedic sages in ancient India to the Hopi elders of the American Southwest, look inward for the cause of destruction, not at the sky. These cultures built endogenous prophecies. In this model, societal collapse is a closed loop, triggered by internal moral decay. They treat collapse as a pivot point, not a dead end. The internal forces that caused the fall can be reharnessed to drive collective renewal. Unlike the Western model of constant upward progress, these endogenous systems share a distinct baseline rule. Over vast stretches of time, human virtue and spiritual density naturally erode. The Vedic texts of ancient India outline one of the clearest mechanisms for this deterioration. They argue we are currently in the Kali Yuga, an age of hypocrisy, where wealth becomes the absolute only measure of a person's merit. It is described as a period where the bull of Dharma, or virtue, is left wobbling on a single leg. Thousands of miles away, Western antiquity recorded the exact same descent. The Greek poet Hesiod outlined the 5 ages of man, describing how humanity fell from an original golden age down into our current sorrowful iron age. Hesiod warned that the social fabric dissolves only when 2 specific internal qualities vanish: humility and moral indignation. When we lose the capacity for shame and the ability to be outraged by injustice, the wicked are allowed to freely harm the worthy. Even the Norse myth of Ragnarok follows this rule. We imagine it as a literal battle of monsters, but the texts say the end times begin with a moral winter, a period driven by such intense greed that brothers turn on one another, shattering the foundational bonds of human kinship. Across these radically different, isolated cultures, the symptom of the end is identical. The collapse requires a failure of internal human morality. We are directly complicit in our own decline. Because the decline is driven by human behavior, these prophecies agree on a difficult truth. A better condition cannot arrive until the societal deterioration reaches a fever pitch. The old ways of living must become so toxic they choke themselves out. The Hopi people of the American Southwest describe this necessary tipping point as the transition from the 4th world to the 5th world, a time when our internal failures manifest loudly in the physical world. Their oral traditions cite specific external signs of this rot. They warned of a cobweb of paths in the sky, an eerily accurate description of modern aviation and global telecommunication networks that connect us physically but not spiritually. They also warned of a house of mica. This describes a building made of glass where world leaders gather to talk endlessly but solve absolutely nothing. The prophecy hinges entirely on a choice. Humanity must decide between following a chaotic, jagged line of behavior or returning to our original instructions, the strict internal moral codes we have ignored for centuries. This crisis functions as a great purification, a necessary systemic fever intended to burn away ways of loving that have become too toxic to sustain themselves. Once the fever breaks, the collapse makes room for harmony. The Vedic cycle resets to the Satya Yuga, an age of truth where the gap between human thought and action entirely vanishes, and the laws of nature are intuitively understood. We can find a modern, secular equivalent of this exact rebirth in the writings of philosophers like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He proposed that the current deterioration, our mental health crises and environmental pressures, are actually birth pangs. The pressure is forcing human minds to interlock into a global web of empathy and shared intelligence, known as the noosphere. So why does humanity instinctively generate these specific narratives? Why do we continually write the same script of moral decay and miraculous renewal? Psychologically, these prophecies serve as homeostatic regulators. They act as a cultural immune response, attempting to correct our course before total collapse by framing current hardships as a necessary stage of growth. Humanity authored its own decline through a loss of internal meaning and the fracturing of community. It follows that we possess the latent agency to initiate our own restoration. The next stage of history remains a choice of our own making.